France in Ukraine pushing the Russians back many miles as the counter-offensive really gathers pace.
This is ITV News at 10 with Tom Bradby.
Good evening. Over the course of the past 3 days, the country has witnessed great royal sorrow and powerful reminders of royal history. But even after all that, supporters of the royal family were not prepared for what unfolded outside Windsor Castle this afternoon. In the depth of their grief over their granny, as Prince William referred to her today, he and his brother Harry emerged together from the castle grounds with their wives Kate and Meghan, in a show of togetherness that would have seemed quite unthinkable only days ago. The question, perhaps, what does it mean? What we do know is that William, the new Prince of Wales, extended the invitation to his brother and sister-in-law. We also learned today the Queen's funeral will be a week on Monday, and it will be a public holiday.
There is a chance tonight that the Queen achieved in death something even she could not manage in life. On the long walk in Windsor, two brothers who have barely spoken a word in the last couple of years. But William and Harry, with their wives, decided that now was the right moment to do this. William and Kate, Harry and Meghan, in the same place at the same time. Given how bad their rift had become, many wondered if they'd ever be able to meet together in private, let alone like this. This week, however, they are sharing the common pain of losing the grandmother they loved. William, now Prince of Wales, showed his sister-in-law Meghan the tributes. And Harry, with the new Princess of Wales. Not lost on any of them, it is a title his late mother once had. It was, according to a royal source tonight, Prince William who asked his brother if he and Meghan would join them here. And both sides clearly agreed that their family, perhaps also the nation right now, needed to see this.
With everything going on, it's nice that they all came out together, the four of them, so that was really special.
Earlier, the new Prince of Wales issued his first word since the Queen's death. She was, William said, by my side at my happiest moments, and she was by my side during the saddest days of my life. I knew this day would come, but it will be some time before the reality of life without Granny will truly feel real. My grandmother, he wrote, famously said that grief was the price we pay for love. All of the sadness we feel in the coming weeks will be testament to the love we felt for our extraordinary Queen. I will honour her memory by supporting my father, the King, in every way I can. Writing words about honouring his grandmother might just have been the trigger for William to pick up the phone or send a text. Whatever it was, an olive branch had been offered today, and it was clearly accepted. All the more remarkable given just 2 days ago, as the Queen became gravely ill, Prince William flew to Balmoral with other members of the royal family, but without Prince Harry. He had to charter his own plane there and back again. The signs of a reconciliation were not good. But last night, in his first address as King, in that speech which met the moment, there was a mention for both his sons.
Our new Prince and Princess of Wales will, I know, continue to inspire and lead our national conversations, helping to bring the marginal to the centre ground, where vital help can be given. I want also to express my love for Harry and Meghan as they continue to build their lives overseas.
In the end, most people won't care what made this happen. They will be just relieved that it did.
I had tears in my eyes. I'm still shaking now. It was just amazing. It just was a nice feeling seeing them all together and kind of happy and greeting everyone, and just kind of gave us like comfort, I guess.
At a moment when the nation needs some reassurance in uncertain times, this display of unity will go some considerable way to help.
Well, let's speak to Chris, who is on his way to Edinburgh for a significant day there tomorrow, and to Amy at Windsor, who was on what's known as the Long Walk outside the castle and witnessed what might become known as the Long Walkabout. Amy, I mean, first of all, give us a sense of it, and particularly of how people reacted.
Well, Tom, over the past couple of days, we have seen thousands of well-wishers come here and lay flowers and pay their respects to the Queen. But I don't think anybody today imagined or could have had any idea what they were about to witness. It's been very silent here over the past couple of days, been a very sombre atmosphere, as you would imagine. But then this afternoon, we started to see all the barriers being erected. And clearly there was some expectation from the public that they were going to be able to see somebody from the royal family. We, the media, did know that the Prince and Princess of Wales that were going to be coming, but we had no idea that they would be joined either by Meghan and by Harry. So when they stepped out, all four of them, from the car, there was, after being so silent here for the past couple of days, a huge cheer for the crowd. We then saw them move and amongst the crowd for 45 minutes. That is an unusually long time for a walkabout like this. But each person that they spoke to, they really seemed to spend time with them and spend quite a lot of time getting into deep conversations with members from the public. Now, after that, I did speak to people that were here, and they were saying, yes, this is, of course, an incredibly sad occasion, but they did each seem to be genuinely pleased after all the agony to see them reunited. And I suppose as well, poignant that it did happen here on the Long Walk, a place where over the years we've seen the Queen on her down days out travelling on her horse, and of course on Royal Ascot days we would see her travelling up the Long Walk to and fro Royal Ascot. And so significant and poignant that it happened here at the foot of Windsor Castle on the Long Walk, a place that was incredibly special to the Queen and to their grandmother.
Amy, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's go and talk to Chris now for some analysis on this. Chris, I mean, you said yourself they've barely spoken in the last year and a half, 2 years. So it was a pretty stunning development, really, wasn't it?
It was exactly that, Tom. And, you know, we started this evening talking about the significant developments that are happening in Scotland tomorrow, when Buckingham Palace this evening released details of the movement of the coffin, and that the state funeral will be on Monday, the 19th of September. But we end it tonight looking at these images of William and Harry and their two wives doing this quite remarkable walkabout. Now, the reason I call it remarkable is because you think how far this has come. This relationship, when we say a broken relationship, it was just non-existent. The two brothers did not speak. And I think what we've seen tonight, and I don't think we should necessarily overplay all the headlines you might see tomorrow of reunited or reconciliation, but at least I think in memory of the Queen, in a week that is absolutely vital for the royal family and support for the new king, I think William clearly decided, and it does appear to be him that held out the olive branch this evening. He clearly decided that, yes, he would hold it. The olive branch was taken, and we had those extraordinary images which took all of us by surprise. I like to think that I can sometimes predict what's going to happen with this royal family. They proved me wrong tonight, because yet again they caught me out.
Chris, I mean, you know as well as I that this is something, you know, millions of people I think genuinely wanted to see this kind of reconciliation. I think it's grieved a lot of people to see the, you know, brothers broken, if I can put it that way, or certainly their relationship broken. It's a reminder too of the power of the four of them. What does it mean, do you think? I mean, was it just one of those things to get them through the next few days or the next week, or is there any possibility of reading more into it?
I think people might be hoping that this is the start of a big period of reconciliation, but actually what it might end up being was just a way in which to get through the next few days. I don't doubt for a second that both the brothers found that very difficult this evening, being in each other's company, but also with their wives, given everything that's been said. You know, we just need to remind ourselves about the Oprah Winfrey interview. We just need to remind ourselves about
everything that's been said and accusations made. It'll be wrong to, set hairs running. I don't think we should jump the gun. You can see where I'm going with this, Tom. I think, yes, this was done in memory of the Queen in order to get them through. We aren't talking about the King's Accession Council, and we will do in a minute, of course, but I don't think anyone in the royal family will worry about that. They're happy with these pictures, and it will mean a lot to a lot of people. But as for the long term, I don't think we can be really sure about what this actually means.
Okay, Chris, that was very clear. Thank you very much indeed. Now, as Chris was saying, really there this morning, all the focus of royal attention was on the ancient process of King Charles being sworn in as sovereign. It is one of the quirks of the British Constitution that as soon as the Queen died, her son automatically succeeded under common law. But 1,000 years ago, before television or Twitter, they confirmed it by proclamation, saying it, making it so. The words used today had hardly changed since the first King Charles ascended the throne 4 centuries ago. The big difference this time, we saw right inside the inner workings of Britain's power base on television. And honestly, it was fascinating.
In a palace built by Henry VIII, a ceremonial event heavy with history. The first time in 70 years this country has proclaimed a new monarch. The first time ever all of us, via television cameras, have been allowed to follow the great and the good in. Within St James's Palace, the Accession Council. In the front row, the remarkable sight of all former living prime ministers, side by side, to witness the formal declaring of a new king. Penny Mordaunt, Lord President of the Council for 4 days, announcing the death of a monarch of 7 decades.
My lords, it is my sad duty to inform you that Her Most Gracious Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II, has passed away on Thursday, the 8th of September, 2022, at Balmoral Castle.
Under the gaze of a prince for whom this will be the future as well as the present, the still unfamiliar pronouncement.
God save the King.
God save the King.
And then, showing just how much has changed in the life of this country, the new Prime Minister, followed into the throne room by the new Prince of Wales and the new King. Echoing the declarations spoken by monarchs past, but which sovereign has ever spoken as personally as this?
It is my most sorrowful duty to announce to you the death of my beloved mother, the Queen. I know how deeply you, the entire nation, and I think I may say the whole world, sympathise with me in the irreparable loss we've all suffered. It is the greatest consolation to me to know of the sympathy expressed by so many to my sister and brothers, and that such overwhelming affection and support should be extended to our whole family in our loss.
A loss etched in the face of the Queen Consort beside him as he paid tribute to his mother.
My mother's reign was unequalled in its duration, its dedication and its devotion. Even as we grieve, we give thanks for this most faithful life. I am deeply aware of this great inheritance and of the duties and heavy responsibilities of sovereignty, which have now passed to me. In taking up these responsibilities, I shall strive to follow the inspiring example I have been set. In all this, I am profoundly encouraged by the constant support of my beloved wife.
And then this ancient oath made by every sovereign since 1714.
I, Charles III, by the grace of God, of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and of my other realms and territories, King, Defender of the Faith, do faithfully promise and swear that I shall inviolably maintain and preserve the settlement of the true Protestant religion, as established by the laws made in Scotland.
The weight of history heavy, the modernity subtle. The King signed the declaration with ink from a pot given to him by his sons. The strain of the occasion momentarily showing on his face. As politicians signed themselves,
I'll just have to put my glasses on in case I see what I'm doing.
A document that historians will read centuries on, under the eye of the Duke of Edinburgh, a reminder of how much we've recently lost. There can hardly be a person around the world who hasn't already heard the news, but this way, from this balcony of this palace in London, is how it's always been declared.
Whereas it has pleased Almighty God to call to his mercy our late Sovereign Lady, Queen Elizabeth II, of blessed and glorious memory, by whose decease the crown of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is solely and rightfully come to the Prince Charles Philip Arthur George. God save the King!
The crowds recording on their mobile phones an event from an age when the news was spread by messenger on horseback. As the band of the Coldstream Guards began the national anthem, those watching outside joined in, the tune so familiar, some of the words so new. A spontaneous ripple of applause, and then this final flourish.
3 cheers for His Majesty the King! Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray!
From Hyde Park, the guns sounded. The news has to be heard as well as seen. From Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, a simultaneous salute. As tradition dictates, and today was all about tradition, the proclamation announced too in the City of London. Pikemen and musketeers heralding its arrival in a scene straight out of the Civil War.
With one voice and consent of tongue and heart, publish and proclaim that the Prince Charles Philip Arthur George is now, by the death of our late sovereign of happy memory, become our only lawful and rightful liege lord, Charles III.
The uniform of the trumpeters still carrying the late Queen's insignia, but we're in a new era now. As King Charles drove slowly back to Buckingham Palace, the crowds applauded as he went. His grief still so new, but his duty already upon him. But then this. Another impromptu walkabout, the second in as many days. Shaking every outstretched hand. If the day started with a history lesson, this, a glimpse of the future.
God save the King! God save
Romilly Weeks, News at 10.
The timetable of events for the Queen's lying in state and funeral are, like today's proclamations, governed by tradition. This afternoon we did finally get the details. As we've heard, the Queen's funeral itself will be held on Monday. As a mark of her place in the life of the nation, it will be a public holiday. The process begins tomorrow when the Queen's coffin, open until now in the Balmoral Ballroom, is driven slowly to the Royal Palace in Edinburgh, Holyrood House.
Enfolded by the landscape she loved, the Queen has lain in the ballroom of Balmoral since her death. But soon her journey must begin away from the place she loved most on earth. Tomorrow, her coffin will travel from Balmoral Castle to Edinburgh and the Palace of Holyrood House. Staff there will be able to pay their respects. So in the Scottish capital today, they are preparing for what comes next. On Monday, a procession along the Royal Mile, accompanying the coffin to St Giles's Cathedral for a service and later a vigil around the Queen's coffin, attended by all of her children. There, she will lie at rest for 24 hours, this nation's chance to say goodbye.
I think it's very obvious the deep, deep affection and love people in Scotland had for Her Majesty the Queen, and people will want to express that in the last moments that she is in Scotland.
Just as her eldest son did yesterday, the Queen then heads south. Tuesday will see the late monarch taken from Edinburgh to London, first to RAF Northolt, then on to Buckingham Palace. From her home of 7 decades, the coffin will follow a route so familiar to all of her 15 prime ministers. On Wednesday, travelling from Buckingham Palace to the Palace of Westminster. There, she will lie in state for 4 days. Like her grandfather and her mother here before her, the Queen will rest beneath her flag in the vast expanse of Westminster Hall. In 2002, 200,000 people queued for hours for their moment to mourn.
If the crowd today are anything to go by, there's going to be far more in excess of that. I mean, this is a moment in history. There has never been a monarch on the throne in Britain for so long.
On Monday, 19th of September, Westminster Abbey will stage her state funeral, beginning at 11. Britain's grateful goodbye.
16 years ago, he walked behind this same gun carriage with his 3 brothers.
7 long decades after she mourned her father, George VI, with thousands of others on a bitter winter's day. The same pomp and splendour afforded to her first Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, in 1965. This was the last time the nation mourned with a full state funeral, the young Queen breaking protocol to be present, just as so many will want to be there for her.
It's been rehearsed over and over again, which is why I think we will be in for a very moving and magnificent few days ahead.
Finally, on Monday, the coffin will be taken by road to Windsor for a committal service at St George's Chapel. The setting for Prince Philip's starkly simple service. Who can forget how our late Queen stood there alone to mourn him? And it will be at a private burial in Windsor that they will be reunited. After a lifetime of service, in death, together again. Rachel Younger, News at 10.
When the Queen leaves the sanctuary of Balmoral for the final time tomorrow, her coffin will first head to the nearby town of Ballater in around 11 and a half hours' time. Sangeeta is there tonight. Sangeeta, this, was her local town. We've heard this week that she often popped in for various reasons. So this is going to be an extremely poignant moment for everyone who lives there.
Yes, it really will be. We're a few miles from where the Queen spent so much of her life at Balmoral Castle, and this final journey isn't just poignant for this area, but for much of Scotland. Her oak coffin lies in her beloved Scottish home. It has a wreath of flowers on top of it. It's draped in the royal standard of Scotland, and she'll remain there tonight. And we'll leave tomorrow morning at around 10 o'clock, and the procession will shortly pass through here. The barriers are already out for what's expected to be huge crowds of people, because over the past few days we've heard of how much the Queen meant to so many people. But here, the conversation is about what Ballater meant to her. I've spoken to many people who've told me they actually used to play with her as a young child along the River Dee here, and others who describe her as their next-door neighbour. Here, as you say, she could pop into shops and cafes and walk along the streets, and that's what residents here really wanted to protect for her, almost a sense of normality. So the fact she'll be making her final journey through here will be an emotional moment for so many people. And when she leaves here, she'll travel down and arrive in Holyrood House, which is expected to take about 6 hours. While there, she'll be joined by the Queen Consort and King Charles III. They'll be with her then as she travels to St Giles Cathedral, where a ceremony will take place. The Crown of Scotland will be placed on top of her coffin. The royal family will hold a vigil to allow people to quietly stand by and reflect on their Queen, and she'll remain there until Tuesday to give many more people a chance to say goodbye for her last journey that she will make across Scotland.
OK, Sangeeta, thank you very much indeed. At the gates of the Balmoral estate, there was a walkabout by the Queen's 3 younger children. Prince Andrew, on the left here, came to see all the flowers that have been placed at the entrance where the Queen's coffin will pass by tomorrow morning. With him was Prince Edward and his wife Sophie, and Princess Anne and her husband Sir Tim Lawrence. They spent several minutes reading the many messages after meeting people who'd been waiting outside. It isn't just around Balmoral that people have been marking the death of the Queen and indeed honouring the new King. There have been special events around the country, and existing ones have been adapted with silences or in some cases singing. The Oval Cricket Ground was one of the places where the national anthem, with newly adapted words of course, was sung. But some sporting events, principally football, were cancelled.
A sporting Saturday in the shadow of the death of a Queen, where there has not been consensus on how best to proceed. Football was cancelled across the home nations, but at the Oval, after calling off play yesterday, the test match returned, and the players took to the field in total silence. And then for the first time in a lifetime at this famous old ground, those words were sung.
God save our gracious King, long live our noble King. God save the King.
In the countryside, a horse show. There were black armbands here too, and a salute.
I salute, ladies and gentlemen, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
And some of the very best of British eccentricity. From the 17th century came pageantry not quite up to the standard of St James's Palace, but there was a man dressed up as the last king who was called Charles. They were enjoying themselves here, but the show started with a solemn prayer.
Thank you, Your Majesty, for all that you've done. Gather up the reins now. It's your time to ride on.
There are some places where they have only recently learned about Elizabeth II and what she represents. These are the children of Ukrainian refugees. At the community centre, their parents sang a lament from their homeland.
My daughter ran from street and said me when she was playing with children, "Mama, Queen died." And in her eyes I saw really very, very big sadness. And we are new here, but for us it's big loss.
In the town halls, the books of condolence are filling with careful entries. Among those who work shaping future generations, there are many who met the new king in the years he was a prince.
He had so much time for all the young people that he met. It was fantastic. We still got the photos on the walls, and that's a long time ago. So I think that sort of work that he did then is going to continue. And for young people in particular, it'll be a fantastic, hopefully, the next 30, 40 years.
There were crowds at the Rugby League today as well, and they roared through the anthem here too. The song and the kingdom are different now, and its people will take some time to get used to it. Geraint Vincent, ITV News.
King Charles is now the head of state for 14 places or realms beyond the UK. 5 are on the other side of the world: Australia, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, the Solomon Islands and the small nation of Tuvalu. Another, of course, is Canada, and today they had their own proclamation ceremony in the capital, Ottawa. Most are in the Caribbean, including Jamaica, St. Lucia and the Bahamas, as well as the independent country of Antigua and Barbuda. When the islands became independent in 1981, the government there opted to keep the Queen as its head of state. The question is, without her, will Antigua decide it is time to choose their own?
4,000 miles away from London, with less pomp and fewer dignitaries, a ceremony to confirm the status of a new king. Antigua is one of 14 nations which still retain the British monarch as their head of state.
By the death of our late sovereign of happy and glorious memory, become our only lawful and rightful Lord Charles III, by the grace of God, King of Antigua and Barbuda.
But for how much longer? Minutes afterwards, the country's Prime Minister told ITV News that he plans to hold a referendum on becoming a republic.
This is not an act of hostility or any difference between Antigua and Barbuda and the monarchy, but it is the final step, as I said before, to complete that circle of independence, to ensure that we are truly a sovereign nation.
What sort of time frame would you think on a referendum then?
So I'd say within the next probably 3 years.
Antiguans saw their queen every day, though she hadn't been here for 37 years. Her portrait on the local currency, the most tangible connection to a distant monarchy. And yet, despite the remoteness of the head of state, many here seem to have had a genuine affection for the royal family.
It's all about the love of her and the passion that we have for her. Although we are independent, we're on our own, but we still look up to her.
She's done a great job, so I just hope he can take up her mantle and do even more than what she was doing.
Queen Elizabeth visited Antigua 3 times during her reign, including this tour 4 years after the islands became independent.
And I'm very happy.
Her son followed in her footsteps 5 years ago to see recovery efforts after hurricanes hit the region. Antigua is heavily reliant on tourism. The holidaymakers spent more time here than the head of state. If the islands are to keep the crown, then the new king may have to demonstrate his relevance, despite his remoteness. The Prime Minister says Antigua would remain a committed member of the Commonwealth, even if the referendum removes the monarchy. But this may be the beginning of the end of King Charles' reign in this corner of the Caribbean. Ian Woods, News at 10, Antigua.
One Commonwealth country that removed the Queen as head of state is Kenya. It became a republic in the early 1960s, and Rohit is there. Rohit, what has been the reaction there?
Well, Tom, it was during a tour of Kenya when the 25-year-old Princess Elizabeth became Queen Elizabeth, and so no surprise that she held this country in such high regard, as she said countless times. In fact, it's one of 20 African countries that she visited during her reign, and during which she developed some deep friendships, including most notably with South Africa's Nelson Mandela. However, what we haven't seen here in Kenya is any evidence of widespread mourning, of public displays of grief, and that's perhaps tied up with the fact that the legacy of colonialism in this country is for many people difficult to separate from their reverence, their deference for Queen Elizabeth. Many people have been talking in the last few days here about the final days of colonial rule and the suppression of a rebellion movement which was seeking independence from colonial rule. We have met ourselves over the last few years people who were castrated and beaten during those final years too. And so it's a complicated picture, and one question may be here whether how much of the respect or the warmth towards the Commonwealth is tied up with Queen Elizabeth personally, and whether that can be inherited by King Charles.
Okay, Rohit, thank you very much indeed. Well, there is one other significant story tonight, and it involves Ukraine's fight back against the Russian invasion. Ukraine They have retaken 3 the villages around them in eastern Ukraine. It is quite a turnaround. Even the Russians admitted today they were pulling back, but as part of the plan to retake the Donbass region, President Zelensky said it was a good idea for them to run.
After more than 6 months under Russian occupation, these Ukrainian women greet their liberators with a hug, after the most successful Ukrainian advance in recent months. In village after village, people welcome Ukrainian soldiers as they take back territory held by Russia since the first week of the war. Ukrainian army video appearing to show its flag being raised in town squares. This commander telling his troops that this will not be the last, one of 30 settlements it claims to have retaken. The Russian army is showing its best by showing its back, President Zelensky told his people. There is and will be no place for the occupiers in Ukraine. The Ukrainian offensive near Kharkiv in the northeast of the country has now seen it recapture 2,500 square kilometres of territory in recent days. They include the key towns of Kupiansk, Balaklia and Izium. These have been important supply routes for the Russian army, which will now find it more difficult to get provisions to its front line. Burnt-out Russian armaments litter the road as British defence officials say in some places the Ukrainian army has advanced 50 kilometres into Russian-occupied areas. In this village, evidence of what its people have endured, investigators exhuming the bodies of 2 young men that it's claimed were murdered by Russian soldiers. The Russian Defence Ministry confirms it has pulled back from several towns. Video on state television shows what it says are reinforcements arriving. But as Ukrainian soldiers show off what they claim are successful strikes on Russian targets, it's a sign that with Western support, Ukraine can win back significant territory. Ben Chapman, News at 10.
Well, let's go back to our main story tonight, and it has been another day of royal history, and in ways we weren't entirely expecting to. And who better to talk about it than the historian you just saw, Anna Whitelock. And if you were watching this morning, you will have seen us discussing the Accession Council, amongst other things. And if you weren't, where were you? But, you know, we can forgive that. It was fascinating this morning, wasn't it? You know, really. That's what I mean. It really surprised me how interesting it was. You were clearly, you've written about this stuff for years, and you were talking about this is where Elizabeth I was proclaimed, and Victoria, and every monarch in between.
I was overexcited. You were overexcited by the Prime Minister's chit-chat, and I was overexcited about the spectacle of seeing history played out again. I've looked at documents centuries old, proclamations from, the reign of Elizabeth I, for example, and there we have, watching before us, this proclamation read out, very similar words. I mean, it really was history in the making. And as I said this morning, even if people aren't, particularly interested in history and maybe cynical about the monarchy, you've got to understand this. I mean, this is where our constitutional monarchy comes from. And as I said, we sort of saw under the bonnet of it. Its absurdity, it was something of a pantomime in places, but it is where we are and why we are where we are now, whether we like it or not. Yeah, I mean, we should point out for those maybe missed the piece at the top, there were so many remarkable things about seeing inside that room for the first time, all the former Prime Minister Gordon Brown chatting to Boris Johnson. Boy, I'd love to be able to overhear that conversation, but that's maybe different. Was there any point to it in the end? I mean, could they get rid of the accession? Because it doesn't actually serve a constitutional purpose per se, does it? It doesn't. It dates back, centuries old. But, I mean, we were chatting earlier, and in the constitutional monarchy, in a way, is sort of a kind of historical Jenga, and you start to pull out bits of it and say, well, we don't need that, and we could modernise that. Well, what are you left with? And you can modernise slightly the monarchy, but really, its legitimacy is founded on continuity and precedent and protocol. And for some people, that is absurd. But for other people, it's reassuring in a time of such change we look back and see these age-old traditions played out again.
But what is it about? I mean, the other country, I mean, we've talked about this all week, actually. You know, the British, it seems to me, don't really do extremism very much. I mean, I know, you know, the people's opinions maybe are a bit more violently divided than they have been in the past. But you look even at other democracies and they have more of a tradition of extremism, it seems to me. I mean, is that all bound up with it? You say not liking change, not liking anything too dramatic?
Well, I mean, some people might say extremely absurd. I mean, other monarchies in Europe have modernised and pared down, so they're much more sort of basic processes of transfer, but really not all the, you know, all the ceremony that we saw. I think we're bound up. We're just caught up with centuries of protocol and tradition, and you know, we're in such a weird place. We don't fully understand or want to think about the fact that we killed a king once.
Well, we never talk about it, do we? Never talk about the Republic and all the rest of it. That's just been sort of airbrushed from history, and no sign of it at all today. You know, obviously.
No, people don't talk about it. I mean, they genuinely don't talk about it. And I mean, we have to remember that even at the time when there wasn't a monarch and Oliver Cromwell was Lord Protector, actually he ended up kind of aping a monarch. He ended up wearing virtually the clothes of a monarch. He was a kind of monarch in all but name. So really, you know, people describe a kind of republic under the cloak of monarchy. It's always been there.
Is it as simple as we tried it once, we're never going there again?
Very possibly. And also you saw today, you know, that kind of historical Jenga, what would have to be unravelled to get to the point where we didn't have a monarchy. I mean, there is layers and layers and layers to unpick. It wouldn't be an easy thing. For some people, you know, they would say it's absolutely necessary. But I think, you know, that we're nowhere near that yet. And at the moment, I think people are kind of looking at this absurd but kind of reassuring.
OK, Anna, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's return to Chris, because it's been another surprising, fascinating day. Chris, seeing the two princes walking there and their wives. Also, actually seeing Prince William, and that's another. We've talked a lot about King Charles and stepping up. We've also seen the new Prince of Wales right by his father's side today, and then taking this initiative, you know, with his brother. I mean, you know, we haven't commented that much on the big step up for him.
Yeah, a huge step up for him. And I think what we've got here, Tom, is we've got the new Prince of Wales, or William as people I'm sure will still call him for a long time, knowing that this is a very important moment and he needs the transition to work, both in memory of his late grandmother, the Queen, but also for his father, the new king. And that, I think, is really very important. That's, I think, why this moment happens tonight. And that process of transition will be helped a great deal by these images that you're seeing right now, and I've absolutely no doubt will be on all the front pages tomorrow. And you know, Tom, in a family where it's normally frowned upon to overshadow the work of a senior colleague, and I refer to King Charles's accession council today, I've no doubt that the new king will not mind one bit that he's been overshadowed today by the very fact his two sons can at least breathe the same air on the long walk. But I think there's a danger in you know, this narrative of a big reconciliation. I don't necessarily think they're on the road to reconciliation. Perhaps they're kind of, at the moment, looking at the map and they're still not entirely sure they want to open it.
In a couple of sentences, though, is there a danger that having raised this possibility, we've all seen them together, it's what people want to see, that it makes any return to rancor even more disappointing to people?
Yeah, that is the danger, that everyone's now going to expect them to be best friends and we'll refer to them as the boys, as we used to just a few years ago. But, you know, Tom, I think you know, if I were to have a stab at what William thought today, he thought, look, we live 300 metres apart. Why on earth wouldn't we go out there together in honour of our grandmother?
OK, Chris, thank you very much indeed. Now, finally, we always anticipate today was going to be forward-looking, the swearing in of a new monarch, couched in a centuries-old ceremony that had never been broadcast before. But what captured the attention and the hearts of supporters of the royal family was a much simpler scene, as Chris was discussing, of brothers reunited, as no doubt the sovereign they knew as Granny would very much have wanted. From all of us, good night. Thanks for watching.
Are you all family?
Yeah.
Do you all support Manchester United?
It's just so nice to see all four together and just, yeah, it was brilliant.
They were really gracious. They spent time with everyone here. They were even asking where the flowers came from.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
God save the King.
God save the King. My mother's reign was unequalled in its duration, its dedication, and its devotion. In taking up these responsibilities, I shall strive to follow the inspiring example I have been set.
Good evening to you. Clearer skies, but we have got some mist and fog patches developing in places tonight ahead of sunnier conditions into Sunday. A big improvement for many locations and a touch warmer than you'd expect it to be given the time of year. Tonight those temperatures drop a few degrees compared to the last few nights, particularly across parts of Scotland, rural spots of northern England and Wales. We've got pockets of mist and fog developing as the night wears on, particularly further east and further south. A taste of autumn for those up bright and early tomorrow morning, but soon this mist and fog will lift to reveal perfect blue skies and stunning sunshine this Sunday. Just a few fair weather clouds, not enough to spoil things. Further west, rain gets going across Northern Ireland, a soaking here. The breeze picks up as that rain just extends into the southwestern Wales. Otherwise, a fine and notably warm day given the time of year.
Now on ITV, Jonathan Dimbleby reflects on the life of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, the longest reign.
The truth is hard to accept. She is no longer here. The Queen is dead. Britain and much of the world is in mourning at the loss of the sovereign at the end of a reign that lasted longer than any other in the nation's history. Queen Elizabeth was more famed for more years than anyone else on the planet. Loved by many, she was universally revered. Her reign spanned many decades of unprecedented change and upheaval. The overriding task of Britain's longest living monarch would be to ensure that the crown would so adapt as to demonstrate that it still had relevance in an age of sustained uncertainty.
And that's what this programme is about. What was her role? Her purpose? How important was it? Why did it matter?